this every week. We feel like there is a lot of confusion, misinformation, and there's just a lot going on for us right now. So a couple things I wanted to say: we are going to be recording this meeting. So if you kind of want to come back to some of the talking points, you can do that. And then if you want to share this with other people, I think it's going to be pretty topical right now for a lot of people. We have a bunch of different bullet points that we want to go over, but this is an open forum. So we've gotten two incredible speakers that are very knowledgeable on a lot of different subjects that are going on right now. And I just want to quickly introduce them. We have Beth Franklin, and she is with Fox Tax Services. So I know a lot of us have a lot of questions about what are the tax implications that are for all of us right now financially. And then we also have Wynne Reece of Reece Law. So, you know, getting some free attorney and accountant information is pretty nice for us. And then again, I just wanted to reiterate, please feel free to ask questions, and you can just message Kathy directly, and then we'll just keep kind of funneling those to Beth and Wynne throughout the conversation. And if you guys, we want this to be like very interactive. We also want this to be something that feels like if you want a subject matter addressed, MN WIFT is very, very committed to finding speakers for a variety of different topics. So let us know if you want to have those. So I just want to go ahead and open up to Beth and Wynne. I think Winnie's going to start first. And yeah, we'll go from here.
Sounds good. Sorry, did we say Beth is gonna?
No, you are.
I am. Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Just want to make sure. Okay, I'm still working on these earbuds. Sometimes I'm getting random noise from my computer. So if you hear anything, please let me know. Hi, it's wonderful to kind of virtually meet all of you guys. I work with a lot of creatives, and that includes any type of content creator and truly anybody who considers themselves to be creative, which I think is most people at this point. We do outside counsel legal work for around 800 businesses now based out of the Midwest. And that kind of runs the gamut from contract related questions to IP, pretty much everything except for tax, which is why we have Beth, the amazing Beth with Fox Tax, and then patent law, but everything else kind of falls under our wheelhouse. So today, you know, we can kind of ask whatever you guys want to ask. Generally speaking, what we've been seeing from our clients, yes, there's been, you know, the kind of three main legislative acts. And if you see me looking over, it's because I have notes to help direct myself. I do have a 7-week-old at home and a 16-month, so my brain's a little all over the place. But for the legislation, you know, there has been the CARES Act, which addresses the relief. There's been the Families First Act, which addresses kind of the employment realm. And then the Coronavirus Preparedness Act, which also addresses different kinds of financial relief. But honestly, when people ask us about questions related to grants, funding, loans, most of the time, Beth is the first person who I contact. And so I kind of leave that realm up to her. Most of the things that we've been seeing with our clients really have to do with people who they work with, their clients, rescheduling, canceling, putting projects on hold, asking for extensions on payment because all of a sudden, you know, funds have dried up, or they have to kind of approach things in a different way. And we've also seen a fair amount now of actually I got 7 questions on it yesterday, as to when the doors reopen and you can start working with people again, can you have them sign a waiver essentially saying, we're releasing all liability. If I get coronavirus after working with you, it's not your fault. That's been a very big question that's coming into play. And then also, you know, if shelter in place is not extended, this isn't really an issue, but I've spoken with the governor's office a number of times about a lot of the content creators out there who are doing kind of porch sessions and differentiating that, kind of family portraiture and family videography work to actual, journalism and how that kind of transfers and what is and what is not allowed. So I could just talk forever, but I want to make sure that, we're addressing what it is that you guys want to address. So I don't know if, Amanda, if you want me to just speak or if you have questions that you want me to kind of answer, I'm happy to do either.
I think right now it'd be great for you just to launch in. I mean, this is your area of expertise. And then throughout your talk, I think we'll just kind of raise our hand and funnel some questions to you if that's okay.
Yeah, that's perfect. Can I know, maybe by this reaction button that Kelly had mentioned, can I know who out there is, has client agreements that they sign, or if you're more here as an employee working for a company? Is there, I guess, who is a freelancer, who has clients that create that you create content for? Is there a way to figure that out?
So what we can do is you can raise your hand. There's a little button that has a blue hand.
Okay.
So if you ask one question at a time, then the participants can hit that raise hand or a yes or no.
Okay. So the first question would be, who works with clients where you are the person who is being hired? Okay, so a fair number of people. And this would also apply in the instance of, let's say that you're subcontracted to a larger business as well. There have been kind of the first thing that we got inundated with was, what happens if somebody wants to reschedule, and what happens if somebody wants to cancel and they all want their non-refundable deposits back, non-refundable, non-transferable. In that arena, there's the idea that it says non-refundable, says non-transferable, so I can keep this money no matter what. That is kind of the understanding of people coming into this. Now, historically, there's never been any language that I'm aware of in contract law that is included in the contract that says, if for whatever reason this absolutely cannot happen, such as government order due to a pandemic, and the work has not yet been done, you can keep your money and part ways. A lot of people have thought that that is what the force majeure clause is for in a contract. That's not the case. So the force majeure clause historically is meant to limit your liability to whomever you're working with. But in the instance where it truly is a government mandate that makes whatever it is that you are working on not able to be done, there's a really tough, it'd be really tough to try to keep all of the money that's already been paid to you if the work is being canceled. Now, with that said, you can reschedule, right? That's what we've really been encouraging clients to try to figure out how to do, is how do you reschedule this? How do you reschedule your shooting, reschedule your project? Or if, for example, you contract to an agency, how do you reschedule that amount of work to a future work? How do you allocate that so that you can keep the funds and so that you keep that business relationship going? In that instance, you do want to sign a cancellation or a rescheduling addendum so that outlines it. But this idea of adding new terms, we see this a lot with content creators, is, okay, we had this project scheduled for this year, you're going to reschedule it to next year, that's going to be 25% more. If your contract doesn't allow you to do that, you really can't do that unless you cancel the contract in full and then you sign a new contract at a higher rate. It actually, if you don't do that, can be seen as a penalty, which aren't necessarily allowed under law, and it's definitely not if they aren't enumerated already in your contract. The other side of it is what actually constitutes this government action. Okay, so a lot of people are saying, okay, so for example, my mom's a composer. She writes classical music, operas and symphonies, and there's arts festivals later in the fall. And in those instances, it's saying, okay, I've been hired to write this piece, or I've been hired to produce a documentary, or I've been hired to maybe produce a TV commercial. And now they want to wait on that. And they're saying, I'm going to cancel this because of COVID. We don't know what is going to happen in the future. Well, at this point, there's nothing beyond May 4th saying that something can or cannot be done. So that alone would make it a cancellation rather than something that would fall under this force majeure language. There is one issue that kind of comes back, and this is one where if they start to cite this to you, then you know that you're dealing with a little bit more of a sophisticated client who has probably consulted a legal team, and this would kind of be a little bit of a flag to consult with your own legal team before responding to them. And that's if they start to say, well, fine if this isn't force majeure, but this is not a cancellation of a contract. It's a termination due to impossibility. So contract impossibility or impracticability. Those are two types of clauses, or two types of, usually they're not actually clauses, but they're actions, that legal actions that can be taken that can completely nullify and void a contract, even if it's outside of that government regulation time period. And those really have to do with, okay, if at the outset of entering into this contract, both parties knew what the intent of the contract was, and now it can no longer go forward because, maybe you were going to bring somebody in to film on TV or for an advertisement, or maybe you were going to bring some people together to produce a short film, something like that. And now you no longer can do that because people are afraid to travel. There are travel restrictions if you're going to go outside of the country. That alone would essentially make the contract impossible to perform because it frustrates the purpose of the contract that you entered into to begin with. You do have to show that both parties knew about the purpose in order to actually enforce that. However, that's not too difficult to do because when you're a content creator, a lot of what you're doing, a lot of the rate that you're quoting is very dependent on knowing the exact details about, how this is going to manifest, where it's going to be, what the usage rights are, what the licensing is, who's going to be involved. And so it's really hard to say that you didn't know the purpose of the contract to begin with. So if you end up having anybody who comes back to you and is, bantering back and forth with you, and they bring up impossibility, impracticability, frustration of purpose is also a buzzword, do take a moment before responding and realize that they probably are a little bit more sophisticated or have sought legal counsel. The other issue with a lot of these, and this will depend greatly on the value of the contract that you are working with. For example, if you are creating an ad for, or footage or something for a large ad agency, it's probably going to be a bit higher of a contract when you're looking at the financials versus if you're, maybe taking footage of an event. But the financial investment to fight right now it's a lot. And so you really trying to work towards coming to a resolution where you can keep some funds and essentially weighing how much can I give back to them versus how much is this going to cost me if I want to fight it, and then thinking about the time frame and whether or not that makes sense for you. One thing I should mention is that if somebody were to claim frustration of purpose and impossibility. At this point, because there aren't any kind of extended governmental regulations that are making everything completely shut down, you can come back and try to negotiate with them and say, okay, I will pay you back your deposit, or, you know, whatever amount that they've given you that they're saying is non-refundable. I will give you that back minus my hourly for the amount of time that I've already put into this. That is a way that you can come to a resolution, save some funds, and truthfully, that's probably what a court would award if you went all the way through with a trial or with small claims court. So if you can get them to agree to that on the outset, you're going to save yourself the legal fees. You're going to save yourself the time, the headache, the emotional drain of having to deal with the court system, which is going to be inundated with small claims, as well as even in district court, because the courts have been shut down. So now they're starting to reopen and doing a test case in Hennepin County to see if they can control coronavirus while they're reopening the courts. And that is going to just be, I mean, months, possibly years of trying to deal with one contract. So if you can come to that resolution, the threat of negative PR has been everywhere. People are slinging threats left and right. They're saying, you know, if you don't give me this, I'm going to go public. I'm going to go on social media. I'm going to go to one of the news stations that's looking for, you know, bylines right now. And I'm going to talk to them about the small businesses, the content creators, you know, the media world that aren't responding well to COVID and that are making it more difficult for people. It's everywhere. I can't tell you, like, before COVID hit, my daily life was, you know, dealing with clients and their like actual legal issues. And I kind of laugh because COVID hit big, I guess I should say, about 2 days after I got out of the hospital from having Charlie. And my undergraduate degree in marriage and family therapy has like become the most valuable thing ever, because I'm very much pivoted to being a psychologist rather than a lawyer right now. And it's because people are terrified, and people, clients, employers, companies, people are kind of capitalizing on that, and not necessarily intentionally, but there's so much emotion going on that they're responding in a defensive way. Everybody's on the defensive right now, and they're responding in a way that's terrifying to other people they're working with. And the immediate reaction right now is, fine, I'm going to go on social media and say how difficult you are to work with. You know, I am friends with some people who are radio show hosts, and the amount of stories that they hear in hopes that it's going to go live on the radio is a lot. It's a lot. And so you kind of also want to weigh, what do I do? How do I defend myself, and how do I stand my ground, but at what cost? And kind of weigh it based on whomever it is that you're interacting with. That also would come into play for the people who work with you, with your team. You know, we had an issue the other day where somebody is refusing, it's an essential business, somebody is refusing to go to work on the basis that they are afraid to contract coronavirus or COVID if they are interacting with anybody. So they're refusing to come to work. They are still claiming benefits through the company, but they've also filed for and are receiving unemployment. Definitely not legal, shouldn't be happening, but the company is weighing, gosh, how much is it costing us to give these benefits right now versus, you know, what could the PR outcome be if this person, you know, kind of goes rogue and starts blasting all over social media and talking with our influencer partners about how I'm being forced to go into work, even though I'm deathly afraid of contracting coronavirus. And, you know, what what is that going to do to the PR that's been built up, that's been, paid for, that's the relationships that have been established versus the cost of maybe giving them their employee benefits for a month. It's a really, really tough spot to be in for a lot of employers, for a lot of people who have contracting teams. But it is something that you want to consider. The other PR aspect that we were dealing with yesterday and today is this idea that once you start working with people again, once you start, working, whoever it is you're working with, whether or not you're subcontracting to another company, whether or not you are working with your own team, typically in the world of media, there's some element of human interaction because of production. Now, in those instances, the question that we've been dealing with is, okay, we want to have everybody who comes in and uses our services, we want to have them sign a waiver saying, if you get coronavirus after working with us, it's not our fault. You can't come after us ever. Okay, so I understand the point of that, but it may or may not be enforceable because somebody could claim that they're under mental duress right now, in which instance most contracts are not going to be enforceable, and people are very much under mental duress right now. That's all over the news. And it just is not going to be, it's not going to be enforceable if somebody can prove at all that they're under mental duress. It's like when I fell and broke my arm in Theodore Wirth Park, and one of the park rangers, I guess they're not really rangers here, but standing over me with this document to sign while I'm laying on the ground with my bone literally out of my arm. And he's like, will you just sign this saying it's not our fault? Like, I mean, I will, but I'm a lawyer and this is never going to hold up. So it's kind of that, like, what's going on in your mind. But even if you did have people sign it, I mean, me personally, if I were to go work with a team of people or to receive services from a team, and they first had me sign a document saying, if I walk away with coronavirus, it's not your fault, I would not want to work with the team. I would say, I'm just going to wait until you feel like it's all clear. And that's been a really, really, really big question. And a lot of people have started to put out there publicly that they're going to make clients or customers who they're working with sign that agreement. I would not recommend that from a really a legal or a PR perspective. Now, on the flip side of that, if you do have a team of people and you are working in contact with anybody outside of your immediate team, then I probably would have a waiver that everybody on your team sign that you keep for your own personal records. Doesn't need to be shared with your client or your customer, but for your own records, saying that, to the best of their knowledge, they have not contracted coronavirus. They've not been in contact with somebody who is positive for coronavirus, and that they are taking proper precautions. The purpose for that is if somebody were to work with you and to somehow get coronavirus, and of course they're going to look to point blame wherever they can because of the emotional side of things, then you have protected yourself from any type of negligence claim because you have created a record of waivers that says that you were taking action, as much action as you legally could take without asking people to disclose medical information that, would not be, you don't want to get into the discrimination realm at all, but you're kind of getting into that, into the area of right now, a lot of employment laws are all over the board and being enforced in ways I've never seen them enforced before because of COVID. But you have these waivers saying, look, I took a reasonable care with my team. I checked in with them. I encouraged them that if you're not feeling well, to stay at home. And I took the action that if I knew they were going to interact with people outside of our immediate team, but before each day of production or before, each new project, if it is only a day of production, I took this step to actually have them sign a waiver. And so to my best knowledge, there was no threat of COVID, no threat of coronavirus. And it really does create kind of a barrier of protection for you guys there.
So Wynne, I have a question related to that, because notoriously cast and crew have very, loose ideas about, how long you can work us. Like I'm seeing a bunch of friends on here that I've worked with. Yeah, you work a 20-hour day, and
Yeah.
safety is something we think, not a whole lot about. So
Mhm.
how can cast and crew members going into a production reasonably say, we need these types of protection? And it's
Mhm.
not, I'm not even talking about like mental health, protection of being scared, but what can we do legally to say, we want these things, we want to make sure of these things before we sign a contract or before we go into a new production?
It's a great question. So, and this is kind of where I say that the world of employment law is just kind of warped at the moment because, everybody is a contractor or freelancer for the most part in those situations. And in normal world, you can't really make any demands about any equipment or any level of control because that's all supposed to be on the contractor themselves. But in this instance, it's kind of a double-edged sword for them, right? So we saw with Instacart, for example, nothing has actually gone through to litigation at this point because this is all only 6 weeks old. But we saw with Instacart, for example, all of their people, they're all contractors, they're all gig workers, they're all freelancers, and they staged a huge coup saying, unless you provide us with hand sanitizer, with masks, we will not continue to work. Now, and I actually, when I saw that, it first triggered in my mind, wait, they're independent contractors. They don't really have the right to make these demands. This doesn't really work. And so I talked with my cousin, who is a managing partner of the employment division of a large firm in downtown. And she said, this is so new, Wynne, like there's not really a good explanation here. But I would say that for you as, a freelancer, as a gig worker, as a contractor, you can make those demands. Absolutely, you can. You can say, hey, I need this in order to work. And there is kind of the double-edged sword PR perspective of it, that if the company could say, fine, we don't need you, we'll find somebody else. But then there's the PR perspective of, okay, so what now? I'm going to go and I'm going to say, on a national news station or on Facebook where everything is blowing up these days, look, all I asked for were basic protections and they denied me that, and they were trying to put my life at risk. So it can be really heavy the other way if they don't actually give you what it is that you're asking for. Now, the caveat there is that there are shortages literally all over the world, right? You can't find all of this stuff, but that doesn't mean that there can't be some expectation of a reasonable degree of protection being made. Now, it's okay, you can pretty much any of the local places, Essence One, Norseman Distillery, they're all selling hand sanitizer now. All of the different fashion houses, Hackworth, Winsome, they're all making face masks now. So this idea of, well, it's just not accessible to me, I'm sorry, you're just going to have to deal with it. That's a dwindling response as far as the strength of that goes. So you, as a freelancer, as a contractor, as a gig worker, you can make any demands that you want. They may say, too bad, can't have them, we're going to hire somebody else. And that's kind of something then that you have to decide. I don't know that there's legal recourse to go after them in that situation because there is no government mandate saying you absolutely must supply everybody with this, but there is a pretty significant potential PR impact there. I will say also, there was a nanny situation that I was contacted about. Is a content creator who's doing some nanny work on the side because of canceled work. And they contacted me because the nanny family had said, if you leave the house, you're fired. So they went to work one day to nanny, and the parent said, nope, now if you leave, you're fired. You cannot leave. You must stay here. You must live here until we say that this is cleared. Okay, I mean, first of all, what? Like, you can't even imagine doing that, you know, to somebody, especially right now, you know, when you need like the comfort and safety of your own space. You know, but in that instance, it was kind of like, okay, they're your employer. They can create whatever protocols they want to create, and you're just taking the risk of getting terminated. Now, this person spoke up to them and said, I would like the comfort of my own home. I need my clothes. I need my hygiene products. I need my bed. I won't go anywhere but the grocery store. And the employer responded and said, okay, you know, so I think there is, I think the PR and the human conversation perspective is probably stronger now than it ever is before. And we are also, you know, talking with a lot of our clients who do have teams of contractors, freelancers, subcontractors, kind of, they're all the same thing, but I realize that when I call them different things, they mean different things in different realms. Associates, interns, you know, we have a lot of clients who are saying, I want to require that they have sanitizer with them, that they have masks on during any communication, that they have gloves that they wear if they're, you know, out in public or sharing equipment with somebody. And in those instances, even though they are requiring this of non-employees, which typically would not be allowed, right now it probably would be allowed and probably would be enforceable. But in that instance, we are saying that there also is the exception here that they probably do need to provide those things to the team or provide the resources to get access to those things.
Yeah. Yeah, that's pretty tense when you're getting into more of a kidnapping role. That seems like legally gray area. I'm wondering if we should move on to Beth, and then do all of our questions at the end.
Sure.
And Wynne, thank you so much. Especially, I mean, so many of us that are on right now are creatives. And so you spoke quite a bit to that, and I mean, we're mostly gig workers, and there's a lot of questions.
Sorry.
So.
Yeah, sorry.
No,
And dogs.
This is life. It's good stuff. So
yes.
Let's move on to Beth, and then if you guys want to be continuously writing down questions for Wynne and Beth at the end of this, we're gonna get to questions after Beth talks. And we'll just go back and forth between them depending on what your questions are in reference to. So Wynne, thank you so much. And let's open up the floor to Beth.
Yes. Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me. And hello from Berlin. It is totally my fault that you had to interrupt the middle of your day and hopefully not your lunch hour to accommodate this time, but it is going on 7 o'clock here. So thanks for being flexible with that. Yeah, I work at Fox Tax. I just celebrated my 10th tax day, although kind of the ceremoniousness of April 15th went away since tax day got extended to July 15th. So we all had to learn how to make a sprint into a marathon and stretch tax season out three months longer. In the middle of all this, COVID hit. So we always wondered what could make tax season worse in terms of workload, and turns out it's COVID. Yeah, so Fox Tax, some of you may be clients, but we work a lot with creative entrepreneurs, small businesses, employees, not strictly artists. That might be our reputation, but we don't work, we do work with all sorts of people, tons of people working in film and TV and entertainment. And yeah, like I said, I'm in Berlin right now. I've been working here remotely for Fox Tax for the last 3 years since I moved, and kind of never came home for my sabbatical. Yeah, so we, like when we've been getting tons and tons of questions. Largely up to date, they've been a lot about the PPP loans, the payroll protection loans, also the SBA EIDL loans, unemployment, the economic stimulus payments, and how everything fits together. Some of you I know are employees and self-employed. You might be just self-employed. You might be an S-Corp. You might be Schedule C filer. You might be a partner in a partnership. And it just seems that they had to create these laws so fast, and now they're retroactively providing a lot of guidance. So we've been trying to digest all of this guidance as it's come out, interpret it for our clients, and then try to make sense of all these puzzle pieces. Meanwhile, people are scrambling to make ends meet, pay themselves, cover bills, waiting for Minnesota to get their unemployment system up to date, right? I really actually, I never thought I'd hear myself saying this, but I feel really bad for bankers and the Minnesota Unemployment Division. They've been tasked with what I feel like is an impossible job, you know, being handed this law and then said, okay, basically rewrite your entire system that you've been employing for decades and make it work for millions of people. It's unprecedented. So I always say, you know, be extra patient with your banker, be extra patient with that person at unemployment, and your accountant and your lawyer. Everyone is making sense, trying to make sense of a lot of crazy things right now. I understand that there was a session a couple weeks ago about some of these resources, and getting into the calculations of some of these are super complicated and case by case as well, and they vary based on what type of taxpayer you are, whether you're employee or self-employed. I'll just cover a couple basic things, starting with it maybe the simplest, not any cleaner, but the simplest, and that is the economic stimulus payment. Many of you have probably, hopefully, already received that stimulus payment. If you have not, it is likely due to one of a few reasons. One, you have not filed a 2018 or 2019 tax return yet. They are using that information to base eligibility. So if you have not filed a 2018 or 2019 tax return yet, do so. If you are not required to for some reason, maybe you are only receiving Social Security, for example, and therefore don't have a filing requirement. They do have a portal on the IRS website for you to go fill out some information so that you're eligible to get your stimulus payment. If you're just behind on filing, because you're behind on filing, you do have some time to get caught up and then still be eligible to get this advanced stimulus payment. Technically, this payment is a 2020 tax credit, and people right now are getting it in advance. So there is also a chance that if you don't get it based on 2018 or 2019, when you file your 2020 tax return, you could get a payment then. Or it could add to your tax refund. It could reduce what you owe for 2020 if you do not get it in advance. As we understand it, you will not have to repay any credit that you get now. So let's say your income in 2019 was low enough so that you qualified for the payment. If all of a sudden, by some miracle, your income spikes in 2020 and you're above the income eligibility threshold, you will not have to pay back any payment. However, if the reverse is true, which I think more people will fall into this boat, if your income was too high, so to get the economic stimulus payment in 2018 or 2019, your income had to be below certain thresholds, and those thresholds are different if you're single or filing jointly, and if you have kids. But let's assume that your income was too high in 2018 and 2019 and you did not get the stimulus payment. If your income is lower in 2020, below the qualifying thresholds, you would get the stimulus payment in 2020. You just have to wait for it. So that's good news for some. There's been some confusion about the stimulus payments okay, if I filed 2018 and my income is too high and my 2019 income is lower, which one are they going to go off of? It kind of depends on when you filed. I've had handfuls of clients in that. We rushed to get their 2019 taxes filed as soon as we found out that they were going to use 2019 as a basis for eligibility if they had not yet already filed. And they didn't notify, hey, this is the cutoff date. So we did file some after they started issuing some of the stimulus payments, and we're just crossing our fingers that they're going to look at 2019, which will override 2018, and then they're going to get their payment. If they don't, and I'm telling my clients, you'll find out within a month or two if that check doesn't show up, and then we'll file 2020 and hopefully get it then. So again, if you're in this group of people who have not yet received a payment, if you had direct deposit information, if you had a refund in 2018 or 2019, the government had your direct deposit information and that's how they issued these payments. If they did not have direct deposit information because, I don't know, you're self-employed and always owe taxes, you could have used their, or you can still use their Get My Payment tool, which supposedly now is working better, to provide your bank information. But worst case scenario, if your income made you eligible in 2018 and or 2019 and they don't have your bank information, they should issue you a check to the last known address. Now, have you moved? Did your bank account close? A lot of these things are coming up. Eventually they will get a check to you. When they're supposed to start issuing those checks at the end of April, early May, they're starting with lowest income people first and moving their way up. So if you earned income right at the top of those eligibility thresholds, I'd expect your check end of May, early June, ideally. If you still don't see it then, or if you have an issue, they miscalculated it, or they deposited it to the wrong account, or maybe you have a kid who filed their own taxes when they shouldn't have. So basically they got the stimulus payment and you should have. Supposedly the IRS is meant to contact you within 15 days of those payments being distributed to make corrections. I don't know how they're going to accomplish that in the first place, but supposedly there will be some mechanism to correct payments in the future. Again, with this, I would just be patient. I know it's hard, but they're scrambling and they've got a really reduced workforce. There's no one answering the phone. So it's just sit and wait. And then worst case scenario, hopefully you can claim that on your 2020 taxes. Again, the Get My Payment, you can go to irs.gov, Get My Payment, try to enter bank information. If you know they don't have it, make sure 2018 or 2019, at least 2018, if not 2019 is filed. A lot of people have not filed 2019 because they're not due until July 15th. However, if you're one of those people where your income was too high in 2018 to get this payment, but 2019, you might want to think about filing. And maybe, like I said, they'll use that 2019 information to override the 2018 and you'll get the payment early. Maybe. All right, so that's the stimulus payments, a little bit on that. Okay, and then, all right, what else to do? There's a few different things like relief programs that obviously have come out. The first couple, I think you all got, well, if you were in the session a couple weeks ago, you found out about, but the Economic Injury Disaster Loan, this EIDL, and the Payroll Protection Program, PPP. First of all, with the Economic Injury Disaster Loan, you can react or raise your hand or whatever, or just make a lot of movement in your screen. If you got any of the Economic Injury Disaster Loan, I'd be really curious to hear about it. When this initially came out, this was meant to be like this emergency provision. $10,000, like if you applied for the loan, you were supposed to get $10,000 advance, which was supposed to be forgivable within like 3 days. No one got that money. Last week, they sent out some guidance that, oh, actually this $10,000 advance is based on your employee count, $1,000 per employee. So if you're self-employed, Schedule C filer, if you're a partnership, an S-corp owner, if you have one employee, then you would have only gotten 1,000, not 10,000. So that wasn't something that was very clear from the onset. So not only were people not getting the money, but then they greatly reduced it if you were, because they said, oh, it's actually based on how many employees you have. So that was the Economic Injury Disaster Loan. We've been hearing some whispers from clients that are like, I just got some random dollar amount deposited in my bank account with like no notice. If that's you and you applied for the EIDL, you might have gotten your funding. You might want to follow up with your bank, but again, that one's pretty sloppy, and I don't think working nearly as well as they had hoped on that. But a lot of people are not getting the funding anyway. It was a great loan, 30-year repayment period, if you got it. And yeah, that $10,000 advance, if you got it, would have been really, really nice as well. Most people focused on the PPP, the Payroll Protection Program. As you know, on Monday, SBA released another huge round of funding because they wiped out of funds within 12 days in the first issue. Lots of hiccups with that first round. Some banks weren't participating. Wells Fargo wasn't participating at first. Banks were dealing with really, really vague guidance from SBA on what these applications should look like, what information they should use. How do we determine forgiveness? Like, a lot of people were getting this loan and there's basically a guarantee that this would be forgivable loan, meaning you would not have to pay it back. And they have no answer for that, or had no answer for that. A lot of banks were forced to create their own applications, which really, really slowed down the application process as well. We have been hearing now that people are getting some of this funding. If you didn't get it in the first round because they ran out of funding, your bank ran out of funding, they kind of kept you in the queue, and then hopefully you got it in the second round. If not, we're still encouraging people to apply. Your bank will hold on to your application, and then if and when they get another round of funding from the SBA, then you're kind of in line to get the funding then. So still highly recommend funding that. How much of a loan you get depends on how you're structured business-wise and how many employees you have. As a self-employed person with no other employees, so if you're filing as a Schedule C, they need your 2019 tax return to calculate your eligible loan. What you'll look at, if you're curious, is your line 31 profit. It's your net income from self-employment. Divide that by 12 and multiply that by 2.5. So you get 2.5 months. 10 weeks of your 2019 profit is your maximum loan amount. So for example, I just filed a tax return for a client. He made just under $34,000 net income. He got a $7,000 loan. Okay, so the loan is based on 10 weeks of profit, AKA a self-employed person's salary. And the maximum forgivable amount is based on 8 weeks of salary. So you can see there's going to be a gap, right? The loan is based on 10 weeks. They only look at an 8-week period of payroll, which means there's 2 weeks of loan payroll that have to go to another eligible expense or will be paid back. It won't be a huge amount in this guy's case, but it's still something to consider. So they are basing the loan amount on something more than just salary. But as a self-employed person, you actually have it a little bit easier than people with employees who have a few other hoops to jump through to make sure that most, if not all, of their loan is forgiven. Other than salary, you can get the loan forgiven based on mortgage interest if you have a mortgage, rent, not a home office rent, but if you had a studio or an office that you had a lease agreement that goes before February 2020. And they also look at utilities. Again, the utility contracts has to be effective before February 2020, but this can be your phone, internet. I don't believe it has to be in your business's name. I think this can be a cell phone plan in your own name, like which most businesses have just one line these days. Talk to your banker though to get clarification on that. I would really, I've been urging everyone to go back to their banker. If you are getting a loan, be very, very clear on what they're going to forgive and what kind of documentation they're going to require at the end for those kind of things, for utilities.
I'm going to jump in here just for a minute. We have a question, and I just want to remind everybody, if you have a question that you don't want to wait till the end of this event to ask, just hit your chat button and you can send me a private message. We have a question. Can we apply for a PP loan in more than one place?
More than one bank, or? Yeah. Well, I mean, I think just in terms of increasing your odds of getting a loan, yes, I would think so. But I think if you are granted a loan from more than one bank, you're only going to get forgiven in one place. Because you can't multiply your, if you get 4 loans, you can't multiply your own payroll 4 times, right? And yeah, I would think that if you get, I don't know the answer to that exactly. I don't know anyone so lucky to have won the PPP lottery 4 times. But I would say that you probably are foregoing. Okay, Michelle has an answer for this. If you want to chime in, Michelle?
Hello, can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, yes, I have experience on this because I have multiple clients who have applied at multiple banks. And what I've been told by bankers and the accountants is that the SBA, once you're funded, you're going to get an SBA loan number. And if you have applied with another bank and that application goes through, it'll come back as an error.
Okay.
And so it's okay to apply to different banks because once you get it, then if the other applications go in, they're just going to get kicked out.
Okay.
And I wouldn't, if you are with other banks and you get a loan number with one of the banks, you can notify the other banks that you've been funded. And if they haven't already sent your application in, then they can stop it. But I wouldn't withdraw your application anywhere until you actually get the SBA loan number.
Yeah, I think that's good advice. Yeah.
So Michelle, this is for Michelle and Beth. So you would encourage people to apply to as many banks, particularly the smaller ones like credit unions, and then whoever approves you first, then withdraw from the others.
Well, yeah, I'm not sure I would quite say it that way to encourage to apply to many banks, but I would say if you have an application in right now at a larger bank and you're not getting anywhere, it's just stalled, then I would seek out a smaller entity like a credit union or just a smaller local bank. Some of the big, like I have a client who they applied through BMO Harris and US Bank, both for more than 4 weeks ago, and nothing.
Yeah.
So now they, that's when we switched to a credit union. I also have other clients that have applied through PayPal. I personally would prefer using a local bank because then you have a banker. That's the other advantage to using a credit union and a local banker is you have somebody to call that will help you through the process. If you apply through something like PayPal or QuickBooks, they may get you through, but then you're calling an 800 number. And I just always feel like I feel better if I can call the same person throughout the whole process to ask all the questions.
And not only that, and I would say Winnie just chimed in too, and she said that, and she's heard from people that it actually is not a bad idea to apply in multiple places. If you do get funded, they're going to cancel other applications, like Michelle was saying, once you get that SBA loan number. I don't think it could hurt.
Right. Yeah.
But on that same note, going to an actual bank you'll actually have an actual bank account. And one thing that we've seen is that banks you have to prove to the bank that you did not use your PPP loan in anything other than a qualified expense. Otherwise, it's not eligible for forgiveness. So if you deposit a $10,000 PPP loan into your business checking account where you're paying everything from payroll, your rent, but also your online subscriptions and your accounting and lawyer fees, how can you say that you didn't use your $10,000 PPP grant on an unqualified expense? Some people are saying you have to open up a separate bank account. Some banks are requiring that you open up a separate bank account for that PPP loan. Is it required? No, your bank may require it, especially if you're opening, if you get a loan at a bank you're not already banking with. They're going to need to open up an account for you there to deposit the loan into, most likely. And I don't think it hurts. Having a separate bank account to keep track of expenses is always something that I recommend, even the smallest freelancers. And I think with this, because we're talking about potentially, business saving amounts of money here that you won't have to pay back, why not take every precaution possible? And opening a separate bank account and having one extra debit card is really not, I think, with the avail of online transfers and, it's maybe a couple extra steps, but we got the time now, to kind of deal with that administrative stuff. So
Beth, I have a couple more questions. I'm going to give you both of them. Can you apply for an EID and a PPP loan? And the second one is it better to apply for a HELOC loan?
Well, yes, you could apply for both to answer the first one. And one thing that people were recommending they do is if you get an EIDL loan to refinance with a PPP loan later, once you have it. because the interest rate could be lower, 1%, and the forgivable nature of it. Whereas a HELOC, there's no forgivable portion of a loan, right? I mean, you might be able to get it. You can deduct interest payments on it, but the interest rate is likely going to be higher than these loans, and yeah, not forgivable. So yeah, I would say that best case scenario, we were saying originally, apply for EIDL, get that $10,000, which is now maybe 1,000, 2,000, and then refinance it to a PPP loan, or apply for a PPP loan, because most of it, if not all, should be forgivable if you have qualified expenses. Yeah, the application part of it, I think, is not so difficult. You know, people were asking questions about where do we get these payroll reports, 941s, payroll details to show that you've had wages they were using prior year. If you are a seasonal employer, so if you've got employees and you don't have regular payroll over, you know, they're looking at the previous 12 months, they did just come up with guidance that said you can pick an 8-week or 12-week consecutive period anytime between May and October of 2019 to determine your payroll. So they just came out with that guidance. So if you don't, you know, this might actually apply to some people who have, you know, more production and more seasonal work. Yeah, and then if you have employees, it's a little bit different. We've now been talking a lot with the companies on, okay, how do I maximize the forgiveness portion of this? Whether I'm a Schedule C filer or if I have employees. If you're a Schedule C filer, again, I think it's pretty straightforward. You're going to get most of that PPP loan forgivable just because your salary is you know, your profit. So a portion of that loan, again, because it was based on 10 weeks, and they're only going to forgive 8 weeks of payroll, you can use towards rent, interest, utilities. If you don't have any of those things, you have a small portion of a loan that you have to repay at 1%, starting in 6 months, 2-year repayment period. It's really not bad terms. If you know and don't spend it if you know you're gonna have to pay it back, you know, or if you don't like the thought of having a loan to pay back. There's no penalties for early payment, early payoff.
So
if you have employee.
So
Yeah.
with respect to the PP loan, since we're on this subject, there is a question regarding, you know, what's forgivable. Are online subscriptions like Adobe, Squarespace, CrashPlan considered utilities?
No, payroll costs, which they've defined as, well, salaries, wages, commissions, things like that. Healthcare, your employees' healthcare costs count into that as well. There's a cap at $100,000 per employee, which they annualize. So they really only look at 8 weeks of a year period. So you can't pay someone $100,000 and then have that forgiven. You know, they're going to cap it per employee. So there are some restrictions on per employee and the total wages that they'll look at to determine how much of a loan you get and how much is forgiven. So payroll costs. The employer portion, yes, retirement contributions for employees are also counted. If you are a Schedule C filer, though, retirement contributions and health insurance do not count. If you're an S Corp with other employees, do they count? We don't know. They have not clarified that. If you are an S Corp owner and you got a PPP loan based on you and yourself alone, they have not issued guidance on whether you can count your own health insurance and retirement in that forgiveness calculation. We're hoping for more clarification on S Corps soon. So yeah, you've got payroll costs. I had one client working with a bank that said payments to their 1099 contractors would count as a payroll cost in the forgiveness calculation. And then I had another client working with a bank that said, no, absolutely not. 1099 contractors are not payroll costs. Talk to your bank and clarify. Again, banks have been put in a position to make some determinations on their own to be really clear. I would say generally if they're not a W-2 employee, it's not going to count into your payroll costs. Yeah. Other than that, mortgage, interest, rent, and utilities. Those are the only qualifying expenses. So no subscriptions, insurance, auto expenses, home office, none of that is countable for forgiveness. Can you hire new employees? So again, yeah, the payroll protection forgiveness when you have employees is a bit convoluted. And right now, I actually think with the stay-at-home orders, like people have been getting this loan, and once you have the loan, you have 8 weeks to spend. So the 8-week kind of evaluation period starts when you receive your loan. I mean, what if you're a retail business, you get a PPP loan, and you're not allowed to open your doors? How are you going to pay employees? And then how are you going to get this loan forgiven? Great question. The AICPA, the American Institute of CPAs, has really pushed the SBA to redefine this 8-week period and be more flexible with it. Either let the 8-week period start when the stay-at-home orders are lifted. Let us say the 8-week period starts with the first pay period. So more flexibility. Otherwise, a lot of businesses right now are in a position. I've got a story for that. I've got a client who got it 3 weeks ago, the PPP loan. Used to staff a lot of people. They run a printing shop. They're not printing much right now, right? So he's got essentially a closed business and a lot of money to spend. So he was in a position, he said, well, do I bring my employees in and pay them even though there's no work to do? And we said, well, you might be putting your employees in a bad position, because if you're paying them, their unemployment benefits are reduced, and they might be getting more unemployment than what you used to be previously paying them. You know, printers, I mean, not making minimum wage, but not making exorbitantly large salaries either. So then he was in a position to be like, well, what do I do with this money? I don't want to screw my employees over. I don't know what to spend it on. They're an S Corp themselves, so he's decided, he brought his kind of administrative assistant in part-time. He pays his own salary. He's paying his rent, and just at the moment not spending most of the loan. And then we'll decide later, oh, I might spend it and then just repay it, or I'll just pay back the loan at the end. If Minnesota opens back up on the 4th and he can bring people back in to do work that's necessary, then he'll pay the wages, and again, he can get forgiven what he needs to spend. So I think employers have been, it's like, oh great, I got this money, now what do I do with it? You can hire new employees in this. You have to maintain your same employee level by June 30th. So your forgiveness, the percentage of how much is forgiven, drops significantly if you don't bring all of your employees back. So they do look back to the time before COVID, way back then, and they look at how many employees were you staffing, and on a per employee basis, how much were they getting paid? And they're looking at, okay, have you brought everyone back? And are you paying them enough? You have to have like 75% of original payroll levels. It's convoluted and it's tricky. If anyone's interested, or actually I'll just share it with Amanda after, there's a pretty helpful spreadsheet that we found online, so you can kind of start plugging some numbers in there. So if you've applied for the PPP and are awaiting it, if you've gotten it and you're like, what do I do? You can plug some numbers in here and have some scenarios back, and then, yeah, just know that until they have changed the law, your 8-week timer starts as soon as that money's deposited.
So Beth, if you want to share that with we will make that available to the participants of the conversation. That would be awesome.
Yep, sure can.
Wynne, I have a few questions for you as well. Someone had written in earlier, if someone comes to work sick, but they're an independent contractor, how do you legally ask them to leave? And then the second thing, we have a question which maybe you could address, is if there's any way you could provide a template for that legal waiver for us to give to people we're working on projects with, so they can sign that, so that we can avoid some of the negligence claims. And I don't know if that's taking people's temperatures or asking them, have they have a cough, have they had any connection, but is there just like a very general template that you could provide for us that we could use on upcoming projects?
Yeah, let me talk with my team about that with templates. One thing I get asked about templates a lot, and we actually do have currently on our website, we have one for rescheduling and for cancellation. So you can go and download those. One thing I always caution people, so there's a lot of sites out there where people can go and buy legal forms, and everybody has always asked, will you just sell legal forms? I actually went so far as to speaking with one of our Supreme Court justices to see whether or not I could do it. And in the state of Minnesota, lawyers can't do that. It's against our professional ethical rules. And it's complicated and I won't get into it, but that's why we don't have them regularly. But because of COVID, we have been supplying